Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to cross continents and centuries to explore a medical tradition that really profoundly shaped global health.
We are. We're talking about Tibba, or Islamic and prophetic medicine.
And it's this system that just refuses to separate the body from the mind and the soul.
Mhm.
It's genuinely holistic, and I think its scientific impact is, well, it's often really understated.
That's absolutely right.
Right.
And our sources for this, they pull from the very heart of the Islamic Golden Age. So we're talking 10th through 14th centuries.
Okay.
We're looking at texts like Ibn Qayyim's Medicine of the Prophet and some really crucial historical accounts detailing these scientific revolutions.
So our mission today is to quickly get a handle on the foundational principles, the historical innovations, and the holistic remedies of this whole tradition.
Yeah.
We're going to show you that the foundations of modern scientific medicine might not be exactly where you think they are.
I think people will be surprised.
Okay, let's unpack this historical context first. When we look at this period, roughly 800 to 1400 CE, the contrast is it's stark. I mean, while a lot of Europe was experiencing the Dark Ages, the Muslim world was in this period of just intense intellectual growth.
And they weren't just preserving ancient knowledge from, say, the Greeks or the Persians or the Indians.
Right. They were synthesizing it and this is the crucial part, making revolutionary additions of their own.
That combination of synthesis and innovation is so key. They weren't just, librarians. They were scientific pioneers.
So who's the best example of that?
I think the scale is best captured by Ibn Sina, who you might know in the West as Avicenna. He was born in 980. His major work was the Canon of Medicine.
We know the canon was huge, but what made it so revolutionary? I mean, compared to the Galenic tradition it was building on, 6 centuries of dominance is a phenomenal run.
Well, it systematized everything. It made medicine logical, accessible. Avicenna actually introduced the concept of clinical testing and a really rigorous methodology.
Things we take for granted now.
Totally. He described infectious diseases, he identified illnesses like meningitis, he laid out pharmacological guidelines. He didn't just repeat Galen, he critically examined everything. And he structured it so comprehensively that it just became the undisputed medical textbook for both the East and the West for hundreds of years.
So that's basically the foundation of modern medical education then. But, okay, this is where the story gets really interesting for me. The radical discoveries that challenged the giants of the past.
Right. If Avicenna codified medicine, Ibn al-Nafis, who lived later, he was busy rewriting anatomy. For centuries, Galen's work was considered, sacrosanct.
Untouchable.
Exactly, including his belief about how blood passed through the heart. But Ibn al-Nafis, who died in 1288, he shocked the system.
How so?
He described the lesser or preliminary circulation, so the movement of blood from the right side of the heart through the lungs for purification, and then back to the left side.
And that went against Galen.
It directly contradicted Galen's long-held theory that blood passed through these, invisible pores in the septum of the heart.
Wait a minute. If Ibn al-Nafis described this in the 13th century, how long before it became known in Europe?
His description predated similar accounts by European scholars like Servetus and Colombo by a full 200 years.
200 years.
Yeah. And his work remained largely unknown in the West until much, much later. It's a profound example of a major discovery just being historically obscured.
That's the theoretical revolution, but that scientific spirit, it wasn't just in anatomy labs, was it? Where else were they innovating on that scale?
They were reinventing the operating room itself. So if Ibn al-Nafis was rewriting the internal body, Abu Qasim al-Zarwi, the father of modern surgery, was perfecting the practical application.
Okay.
He lived from 936 to 1013, and his surgical encyclopedia, Al-Tazrif, it included descriptions of operations, treatments for fractures, and, get this, detailed illustrations of over 200 surgical instruments.
200 instruments. I have to imagine many of those became the template for surgical tools used all through the Renaissance.
Precisely. His work just eclipsed Galen's surgical texts and remained the standard European reference for half a millennium.
Wow.
And this whole ecosystem of knowledge, it required massive infrastructure, which, brings us to the hospitals.
It's clear they were pushing individual scientific boundaries, but none of this works without huge support systems. What kind of institutions did they build to manage all of this?
They created the bīmāristāns. Now, these weren't just places to house the sick. They were sophisticated, purpose-built medical cities.
Medical cities.
Yeah, they provided integrated care. They were medical schools, research centers, and pharmacies all at once. They had lecture halls, huge libraries, charity wards for the poor of all faiths, and even specialized psychiatric wings.
That model of integrated care education, research, and treatment all under one roof sounds exactly like the teaching hospitals we rely on today.
It is the template. I mean, think about Baghdad during the Caliphate of Al-Mamun. Historical sources say there were 60 hospitals and 860 registered physicians.
That's an industrialized approach to healthcare.
It is. So, if we step back, the key takeaway here is methodological. Scholars like John William Draper recognized Europe's intellectual debt. The Muslim world didn't just pass along knowledge, they introduced the spirit of inquiry itself. That insistence on the experimental method, observation, measurement.
The scientific method.
The very foundation of what we define as science today.
Okay, so that scientific rigor explains a lot. But let's shift from history to philosophy. How did that translate into their day-to-day approach to health?
Well, their medicine wasn't primarily about heroic cures. It was rooted in the teaching that prevention is superior to cure.
Ah.
Health is seen as a gift, and the goal is just maintenance. Illness is something that requires patience, but also research.
That sounds incredibly systematic, which, fits the scientific mindset we just discussed. So if prevention is paramount, what did they identify as the main causes of health or disease?
They formalized it. They identified the 6 major causes of disease, or you could say the 6 essential inputs to human health that have to be kept in balance. And they viewed these not as background noise, but as active levers you had to manage daily.
Okay, walk us through them.
The first is air. It's purity, temperature, and making sure you get sufficient oxygen. They knew that seasonal changes in environment directly affect your internal balance.
Makes sense. What's number 2?
Second, food and drink. This meant strict moderation and a recognition of a balance of qualities: hot, cold, dry, moist, and food. And you'd tailor that to the person, their age, and the climate.
Okay, so a very personalized diet. What's next?
Third, bodily movement and rest. Regular exercise was basically mandatory, but they also warned against pushing yourself to dangerous limits.
A balanced approach to fitness.
Right. Fourth, wakefulness and sleep. Avoiding excesses of either. This is where you see the recommendation for the midday siesta, the qailula, to avoid being overtired.
You could use one of those. What about number 5?
Fifth, emotions. They had a profound understanding that severe stress, worry, and anxiety aren't just in your head, they directly lead to physical illness.
That's a huge one, the mind-body connection right there. And the last one.
And finally, sixth, emission and retention. This covers the body's natural functions, eliminating waste properly, and also things like lawful intercourse.
It's a remarkable framework, almost like an ancient checklist for wellness. What are some of the most memorable stories that illustrate this idea of moderation?
Well, the concept of moderation is perfectly captured in the teaching about the stomach. The saying is that the son of Adam fills no vessel worse than his stomach.
I've heard that.
And it offers a practical rule. Reserve 1/3 for food, 1/3 for drink, and 1/3 for air. It's a direct instruction against gluttony, but it's framed as a health directive.
That 1/3 rule is everywhere in wellness circles today. And you mentioned balancing hot and cold foods.
Yes, there's the famous example that the prophet would eat watermelon, which is cooling and moist, with dates, which are warming and dry. This wasn't just random. It was a conscious dietary strategy to maintain internal equilibrium.
And what about fitness? It wasn't just a suggestion, was it?
Not at all. The historical record shows him racing his wife Aisha and also actively digging the trench during the Battle of Azeb, even around the age of 57 to 60.
Wow.
It emphasizes that consistent, serious physical activity was just expected, even well into old age.
And this all leads to hygiene, which in Tibbs seems to have been absolutely foundational.
It was non-negotiable. Cleanliness was integrated into faith, often called half of faith. And this religious obligation led to extremely high standards of personal and household hygiene, ritual purification, way before germ theory existed.
And there's a historical connection there, isn't there?
A huge one. It's noteworthy that during the Black Death in the 14th century, the plague often stopped at the borders of the Muslim world. Modern historians have directly attributed that to these deeply ingrained standards of cleanliness and public health.
So while prevention was key, they obviously had remedies for when people did get sick.
Oh, absolutely. The philosophy also mandates research and the use of remedies. It's based on the principle that for every disease there is a remedy, and that's what fueled their advances in pharmacology.
So let's talk about some of those remedies, maybe the ones that have the strongest historical validation, starting with honey.
That would be honey, yeah. The Quran calls it a beverage of many colors in which there's a healing for men. The prophetic teaching goes even further, saying it's a healing for every disease except Sam, which means death.
And modern science, it actually backs up a lot of that, doesn't it?
Completely. Today we know its antimicrobial, antibacterial, and antioxidant properties make it incredibly effective for gastric issues, healing wounds, burns, all uses that were central to the Tib pharmacopoeia centuries ago.
Okay, next up, the black seed, or black cumin. This one has an even more powerful traditional claim,
It
right?
does, healing for all diseases except death. That claim just highlights the perceived potency of this remedy. Traditionally, it was used to reduce swelling, dissolve things like gallstones, open blockages, and ease respiratory issues like a cough.
And what about everyday staples, like the olive?
The olive tree is called a blessed tree. Beyond just being a food, the oil was widely applied medically. It was often prescribed for intestinal issues, like hemorrhoids, because of its moistening and balancing properties.
But I think the most compelling example of this ancient wisdom being validated has to be oral hygiene.
Absolutely. The siwak, this simple twig from the arak tree, used for cleaning teeth. It was emphasized not just for fresh breath, but as a matter of religious importance.
And modern analysis has confirmed what exactly?
That this miracle brush contains natural disinfectants, anti-decay acidic inhibitors, sodium bicarbonate, a core ingredient in modern toothpaste, and even anti-plaque enzymes.
So a routine religious practice mandated using a tool that millennia later, labs confirmed contained all the active ingredients of high-end dental care. That is just staggering preventative dentistry.
It really is, and it speaks volumes about the level of observation that underpinned Tib. We could even briefly mention remedies for specific emotional states, like talbina, which is a barley broth prescribed specifically for patients experiencing grief.
So an early recognition of the food-mood connection.
Exactly.
It feels crucial that we circle back to the holistic definition we started with: body, mind, and soul. Where modern medicine often splits them apart, Tib insists they're inseparable.
Right.
So how did they actively try to heal the soul or the mind?
They understood that constant stress and anxiety compromise the physical body and lead to actual, concrete illness. So the primary remedy for unrest was internal stability. The sources link this to the remembrance of Allah, noting that hearts find satisfaction and stillness there.
So it's a spiritual antidote to the psychological turmoil that they already identified as a cause of disease.
Precisely. And that internal control is prized above simple brute force. The definition of strength is based on self-management. The truly strong person isn't the one who can overpower others, but the one who controls himself when he's angry.
Anger and unchecked emotion were seen as toxic inputs.
Yes. And this concept culminates in the idea that the ultimate cure isn't a herb or a potion, but the sacred text itself.
The Quran.
Yes. The Quran is referred to as a healing and a mercy. And this means it's a curative force for both spiritual issues and, at times, physical diseases. There are historical accounts of the opening chapter, Surah Al-Fatiha, being recited to cure something specific like a scorpion sting.
But this isn't just about faith healing, is it? It's about marrying faith with science. It gave scientific inquiry a kind of religious mandate.
Exactly. And this is the crucial point for you, the listener, to understand. Islam actively encouraged scientific inquiry. Striving for knowledge, including medical knowledge, was declared a most sacred duty for every Muslim.
Because of the belief that.
The core belief was, God creates no disease without also creating a cure for it.
Ah, so that principle turned the search for medical breakthroughs into a form of worship. If the cure exists, then searching for it is actually fulfilling God's will.
It infused all of medical research, from surgery to pharmacology to anatomy, with a profound religious holiness. This moral and spiritual obligation to seek, to experiment, and to discover is why the breakthroughs of the Golden Age were so pervasive and so rapid. They were working not just for the sake of science, but as an act of obedience.
So let's try to synthesize everything we've uncovered.
Well, to me, the sophistication of Tib wasn't just in its individual remedies or even its great doctors. It was in its integrated approach. It fused rigorous experimental scientific methodology with this really structured, profound commitment to preventative health, to hygiene, and to spiritual wellness.
And this tradition gave us the sophisticated teaching hospital, it gave us surgical techniques that lasted for centuries, and it identified and codified natural medicines that our own labs continue to validate today. It was a shortcut to being well-informed about health centuries before the modern era.
That's a great way to put it.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to consider. In our highly specialized modern world, medicine is often compartmentalized. You have a doctor for your body, a therapist for your mind, and maybe a separate source for your spiritual needs. The holistic view of Tib treated the search for knowledge as a sacred duty and viewed the patient as a single, interconnected system. What valuable insights might we be missing, and how might our current approach to health change if we reinvested the search for medical breakthroughs with that same sense of spiritual and intellectual necessity? Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.